Toughest job in America. We're going to delve into that a little bit. We're talking Auburn football for the next hour here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Man, we got my guy on the line right here, Joe Hunk. Join him on the Fallout, 7:40 a.m. Montgomery, Alabama. Joe, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. You can't see it because I've got the green screen back here, but it's been pouring down rain for like the last week and a half. So anything fun that can get me kind of amped up is definitely what I'm needing today. So I'm ready to go.
Okay, you really can't see it because of the screenshot here, but
Yeah.
it'll be one of the few times I can brag being here in Connecticut. It's about 55 and sunny, so we'll take that in mid-February.
Yeah, the only sun that we have had in the past week and a half is when I went down to Mobile for Mardi Gras on Saturday. That's it, and that was Mobile. By the time I got back, it was raining again. So that's it. It's been the lower part of the state.
You know, Joe, I opened the show making the comment about possibly the toughest job in America. I saw a legitimate poll, like nationwide, whether it was on CBS, ESPN, somewhere in the past couple of years, talking about toughest jobs in America in college football, and Auburn won. And I understand why. And I've heard this perspective talked about, and I've talked about it myself. Obviously, Auburn's not Kansas or Oregon State or Rutgers, like, man, toughest job in the country. You can't win. No, but in regards to expectations, tradition, prestige, all of that, plus you're located in the state with the gold standard of college football over the past decade. You're now having to face the 2019 national champions in the same division. Oh, you got this juggernaut on paper that's potentially an elite program at Texas A&M, and you're in that pressure cooker of the SEC, and you're right there, all eyes on you, and it's tough to keep up, even with top 10 recruiting classes coming in every year.
Well, and part of it also is the life of an Auburn fan. You can even go back, and you and I have talked about this. Go back to 2017. You beat Alabama and Georgia in the last two, meaningful SEC football games of the regular season. And who are the two teams that are playing for the national championship just weeks later? And that's Alabama and Georgia. And then you can even spin it around and look at this year, and it's LSU. So, and people get this, that Auburn over the past, let's say, decade has probably played Clemson 4 or 5 times outside in their non-conference schedule, whether it was in Atlanta for a kickoff game, or if it was a home series between Clemson and Auburn, where they played in like 2010, 2011. Then they played in 2 more games past two, a couple of years ago. And obviously your rivals with LSU. So look at teams that have played for the national championship in Georgia and Alabama in 2017. You've played Clemson in all the years that they have played for the national championship, and you're also rivals with LSU. You're in the middle of this little group, whether it's looking towards, LSU and Baton Rouge, or if you're looking at what's going on in Tuscaloosa, in Athens, or even in Clemson, South Carolina, that you're getting this from all sides. And so, when you're losing, Auburn fans are getting upset because Malzahn is losing, but at the same time, you're losing to teams that are either playing for or are winning the national championship every single season.
Talking Auburn football for the next hour with Joe Hunk from the Fallout, 7:40 a.m. Montgomery, Alabama. Joe joins us on a regular basis to break down the Tigers and the Crimson Tide as well. Bo Nix. So if the spotlight's on the Auburn football program and the comparisons across the SEC, and that's a pressure cooker in and of itself, will hit the two main focuses of that spotlight, of course, the head coach and the quarterback, and to lay that all at a freshman's feet right out of the gate against Oregon on a nationally televised game with what that was considered the most important game of the college football season, non-conference. And he had his ups and downs. Mm-hmm. And how do you think he persevered through it, not just in regards to performance and results on the field, but based on how he pulled through emotionally, mentally, and leading this program on the field?
Start off with the last one, and I go with the mental side of this. Man, the mental side, this kid is strong. Like, there is really nothing that gets to him. And, for people that don't know, the people that are hopping on this live stream for the first time, Bo Nix his father was not just an Auburn quarterback. He was the quarterback at Auburn when they were undefeated and arguably one of the best teams in the country in the early 90s. And so to grow up with that father, and then to, as just hearing the history of it, and anytime just going back to Auburn and everybody just loving your dad, because before Cam Newton stepped on the field, Pat Nix was the guy. Like, that was the guy that everybody remembered, the 93, 94 seasons. And even with Stan White talks about those years, even as the backup to Pat, and to when he went on and what he did early in Auburn in those early 90s as well. And to see him grow as this kid in the spotlight. And then not only does his dad come in and he's still this big, huge figure in the state of Alabama when it comes to Auburn fans, he then becomes a high school football coach in Scottsboro, Alabama, which is in North Alabama. And it seemed like he was grooming his son to be the starting quarterback. So now your dad is the high school football coach of your high school. You become the starter. So because if everybody knows the way that recruiting is, oh, well, you're only playing because you're the coach's son and that sort of stuff. Then they move off and they go down to Birmingham, and then they go into Pinson Valley. Same thing applies. But now he's playing for state championships. He's playing in Tuscaloosa. He's playing under these conditions where, again, oh, you should be winning these championships. And now you get him to Auburn. You have this spotlight of not just what's happening at Auburn, but what's happening in Tuscaloosa, what's happening in Georgia and Athens, and now what's going on in Baton Rouge, basically everything we just hit on, and the kid shows up. And yeah, he had growing pains. The Florida game, he made a bad read at that point in time. You can look at even the Oregon game when he didn't play great, but he had an amazing pass at the end of it that we kind of forget that his struggle through the whole game. But as the season went along, he did grow and he did make great passes. And what's so great about this, and what's going to be the part of this that Auburn fans are going to see, is I'm a huge fan of watching the NFL Network. I watch it every single day. In fact, I love Good Morning Football, guys. If you're listening, hey, how's it going? And as this goes about, they're showing highlights of what players have done for Auburn and Alabama. But you do get to see now some of these passes that Bo Nix had, because what they're doing on ESPN, on NFL Network, they're showing what Prince Tega was doing at the left tackle position, but that's kind of showcasing the way that he blocked to help Bo Nix set up everything. And in talking good about Prince Tega, Auburn fans are kind of getting to see all the good passes that Bo Nix really made throughout the season and kind of how he grew. And he's grown to a quarterback that in his sophomore year, it's more about like the movie, and it's one of my favorite movies as a kid, don't ask me why, is What About Bob? And the whole time, it wasn't about taking these giant leaps to become a better person. It was about baby steps and baby steps and baby steps. He took a lot of baby steps. He took some backward. But when he did, he learned from them, and he did kind of grow. You saw him be a smarter quarterback. That was the key to this. It wasn't about the physical ability. It was about being the smartest quarterback in this whole thing. And for him going into this season, he's going to be a smarter quarterback because he's a film junkie. And people don't get this. Being a film junkie is one of the biggest things that you can be to learn about this, because once you start getting up into the pros, once you get to being a junior, trying to improve your game between your junior and senior season, it's about the film study. It's about the mental side of this. It's about, how am I going to be? Is Tom Brady the best quarterback in the NFL because he's the most athletic, the best arm, the most gifted? No, he's the smartest. And that is where he can take average wide receivers and make them into Super Bowl champions. And Bo Nix is having to learn and is learning how to grow from some of those mental mistakes. And even, Matt down there said, glad Florida doesn't play Auburn next year. That's part of this is that game against Florida was really one of his big first tests on the road, and he grew from it. And it's not one that I think he's going to step down from his failures. He's going to look back at him, and he really is going to be this kid that grows every single time that he screws up.
57% completion percentage last year in today's game. That's not a great figure. It was 10 or 15 years ago, but man, these kids are completing 65, 68% of their passes, but it all depends on the offense, depends on Chuck plays. 16 TDs, 6 picks, 2,500 yards, also chipped in with 7 touchdowns on the ground. And I'm glad you hit on the film study aspect of it, because I think there's a misconception, and many of us fall into it, that if you're a running quarterback, then you must not watch film. You have to be a passer to watch film and stand in the pocket and dissect the defense, because then you need to watch the film. But if you're athletic and run around a little bit and do that as well, you must just be kind of a baller. You don't watch film.
No, and there's some quarterbacks that Bo Nix has ability to run. He's a mobile quarterback. Is he a dual threat quarterback? Well, that really just kind of depends on who you want to ask as far as the term that you want to use with dual threat. But with him, his mobility is going to be more about trying to open up the passing lanes to make sure that he can make the pass. He's always going to focus on the pass more. One quarterback that I've loved that was more about focusing on the pass but using his legs to do so is one that may be the second biggest free agent when it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL this year, and that's Teddy Bridgewater. And a lot of times when he was in Louisville, he would only use his legs to actually open up, try to buy some time with this. The thing about it with Bo Nix is that when you look at him through this football season, and people do forget this, Auburn's losing a lot on the offensive line, but at the same time, that may actually be a blessing, because there were a lot of times where Bo was having to scramble just to get a pass off. And so for him, I think that using his legs as far as a dual threat is going to come in more when you're talking about running that read option in the part of the RPO, which a lot of people forget. Majority of your RPOs, the decision is made before the snap based on what everybody is giving you in the read. And so for him, using those legs is going to be something where he can potentially start looking for more of that downfield passing threats like he was trying to do this year, but being smarter with that in his mind is going to be his best asset.
Hey, folks, leave your comments and questions about Auburn football. Of course, we've got college football fans from all fan bases that join us for these live streams and join us in the live chat room, so we appreciate that. But in regards to our talk right here, it's going to be all Auburn-based. Vernon Speaks Sports covers Auburn football. Please join him on YouTube. We appreciate the contribution, Vernon. Vernon was going to join us on this live stream, had some other work responsibilities. Got Joe Hunk on the line from the Fallout 740 AM. And please, the Super Chat's available to help us build the channel. Also, yes, I want to ask everyone, I am not a big Twitter guy, so you're not going to see me like tweeting out comments and making all sorts of opinions on Twitter. Maybe I should, but you know, as you can imagine, with everything I've got going, I just haven't found time to do that. But I've got a Twitter account, and I'm not going to go through the full explanation, but have some people looking at that Twitter account right now. So you're going to help me by following me, and I've been asking for this for about the past week, that you follow me on Twitter. Even if you don't go on Twitter, could care less about Twitter, but you got a Twitter account. If you don't have a Twitter account, open one and just follow me. Even if you could care less about Twitter, it will help us build this channel.
And retweet as well, just like we did earlier. Retweets.
That's it. Man. Yeah. Joe was kind enough to post a little publicity for the live stream here, and me as well. So we appreciate everybody who's jumping on board. Jay Jobs does a nice job every time. It kind of fits. Jay Jobs does a nice job of letting everyone know, like the videos, because that helps the YouTube algorithm as well.
It's all about math, man. People think that math didn't matter in high school, and this is the only thing that really helps us out.
Well, we don't understand the math, but we know that the math's working in some.
We don't. In fact, the reason why I've got a green screen is because I have a video game stream that we do, and we're just now learning the math on ways to improve it so that more and more people can watch those, whether it is on Facebook or YouTube Live or on Twitter or Twitch or Mixer or all these other places you can go.
Joe, if you crack the code, let me in on it.
Shares. That is the code right there, man. Shares. Look, just if you think Mark is pretty, just share it. That's all that matters. Is the more shares, the more people that watch, the more views that happen, the more interaction and the fun we have with college football in the middle of February and March.
Joe, I don't know that that's our best selling point. I don't think we
Look,
can run on that one.
I mean, send him a helmet. Look at the helmets behind you. I mean, come on, like we can throw your helmets up there. Let's have some fun with it.
So we've got about 20 helmets, and
Yeah.
actually, I would say Auburn, Georgia, Nebraska, Penn State are the first four to come to mind that are the biggest power players in college football that I don't have.
You don't have an Auburn or Alabama helmet?
Don't have an Auburn. Don't have Auburn, Georgia, Penn State, Nebraska. Those would be the four top programs, I would say, that I don't have. Wisconsin, Oklahoma, USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Florida, Kent State, alma mater, Notre Dame, Miami, Alabama, Clemson, Florida State, Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss. The Tennessee Ole Miss were given to me, so they snuck in there. Not that they shouldn't be represented, but not in front of Georgia or Auburn.
So two questions for you.
Yep.
One is not really a question. It's more of a statement. We're going to fix that when it comes to the Auburn one for sure. The second part of this is going to be you've got to figure out which Alabama one you want, because in this state we have some stores and they're called Tiger Fever or Bama Fever, Tiger Pride. And so with these, what happens is every time Alabama wins a national championship, they ship out new miniature helmets to sell with the number on it, because that's what Alabama does. So what you've got to do is you've got to let us know which numbered helmet you want, and we're going to make sure that you get both of those, because you can't not have Alabama or Auburn back there all the time.
I saw an article just posted earlier today on 24/7 Sports that had Alabama listed with 12 national championships. Now, an Alabama fan would start a fight. I think they're at 17, right? I've got the 16 edition.
You got 16. Okay. See what happened. Okay, so for people that don't realize this, is the 12 that you're talking about is the AP national championships. And so there are some that were kind of retrograded or retro added. A lot of universities have talked about doing this. In fact, Auburn talked about doing this a couple of seasons ago. And I believe with Auburn, if they wanted to retro add, which is language right now that's live on all around the world, is they would have went to like 9 national championships. If they wanted to add all the ones where these random publications that were possibly big back in the 10s and 11s. And when I say 10s and 11s, I don't mean, 2010, 2011. I'm talking about 1910 and 1911. In fact, one national championship that I don't think Auburn claims, where Auburn, I want to say maybe 1913 might have been the year where they didn't give up a single point all football season. And so they could have added that or used that as a national championship if they wanted to. So a lot of these are some of those Rose Bowl years that when Alabama started going through these, or years where maybe somebody else was named the national championship, but a reputable or a respected publication named Alabama the national championship. It was a big publicity stunt back in the 80s. And so, but for my generation, where I was born in 1984, I never saw Bo Jackson play anything except for baseball for the Chicago White Sox. We never actually knew Alabama with anything but 12 national championships going all the way through 2009. So that's kind of the numbers that stuck with us. With Auburn, it was always the one. And so when Auburn won in 2010, it stayed to adding the second, which was the 2010 national championship. They just never made the decision to actually start acknowledging all these other national championships. Matter of fact, there are books that are written about it. Maybe I may actually have one over there that's called the Unclaimed National Championships for Auburn. And so that's the reason why you have some say 12, some say 16, some say 17, some say whatever they want to say. It really just depends. And Alabama isn't the only school that has ever actually went back and added national championships that they didn't already have put up on all their facades and everything. It's just they're the most notable because of the fact that they keep it on the side of their helmet.
I once got into a little argument with my girlfriend of all people at the time because she asked me, who's got the most national championships in college football? And I said, according to who? And then she said, well, who has the most names? So anyway, it became this big back and forth because I was trying to explain to her, depends on who you are listening to. And the reason everybody, as you know, Joe, focuses on Alabama is because they're at the top of the heap. So everyone just thinks that they're stealing national championships, but everybody else is reviewing the record books as well.
Well, and you can go back and look in talking about the national championships, Harvard. I mean, you can go all the way back to those days when college football was first getting started. In fact, Harvard and Yale, their rivalry doesn't even go to just the fact that their rival schools like Alabama and Auburn, Michigan, Ohio State. Their rivalry goes all the way back to the beginning of football, where they were arguing over the rules of football. And so that's the reason why I believe some of their records may even differ on what games count and things like that, because of the fact that they argued over the start of college football and what rules they were using. Were they going more rugby style? Were they going to a different route? And so it's kind of interesting to see that that's even how that rivalry is. And it even goes back to national championships.
Get our guy, Navy Thomas, who's a big supporter of the channel, making the link between his team, Nebraska, and Auburn. Jonathan Rutledge, special teams analyst at Auburn, moving on to Nebraska after 4 seasons with Auburn, or 2 seasons, I guess.
Well, right, and people don't look here. And here's part of this is why did Auburn win not the national championship, but why did Auburn win the Iron Bowl this year? Because of kicking. And Auburn has a kicker in the Carlson brothers. They have, one is in the NFL now. He struggled for the Minnesota Vikings. He then goes to Oakland, now Las Vegas, and he's having a really good career in the NFL. His brother stays back, and his brother comes into Auburn, and there's these huge expectations. If you go through your stats and you look at the numbers you look at the numbers of his accuracy and all this other stuff from 2019 or 2018 and 2019, you're going to say, he's not really that great. The reason is because with the way that Malzahn was running his offense at the time, he would tell Anders Carlson, that's a 51-yard field goal. You got this. Go on out there and you can kick it. And he'll kick it wide right or wide left or anything like that. And he was messing with his mental side of the game. Going back and going into that Iron Bowl, Alabama had struggled with the kicking game, but at the same time, because of how Malzahn was using his kickers and his kicker, we were always terrified that it was going to mess with Anders Carlson's head. So when he actually started making those field goals in the Iron Bowl, Auburn fans were like, whoa. This is the guy that we've been waiting to see the whole time. And it's because of the coaching in the mental side of this that you kind of saw this. And now you're going to really see this. He's a great special teams coach. And between what he did and the ability, because a lot of times, and you're hearing this a lot now in the NFL, special teams coaches could be the newest trend when it comes to being hired as head coaches because of their ability to coach all sides of the football field, whether it's offense or defense, because of them trying to put players on the special team. So it could be a really interesting hire to go in what he is doing and going to Nebraska.
I got to see, Joe, that NFL Network viewing is paying off for you.
I'm telling you, I live this stuff. And I live all about what's going on in the draft, which, by the way, that's another one. When you're talking about some changes going on with Auburn and even special teams, look at what Noah's doing and the way that he is looking at, because this is going to be a very interesting NFL draft, because we know about Derek Brown and how high he is going to go. Marlon Davidson is going to be another one that's going to have a high draft pick. But Noah, the cornerback, who was originally a wide receiver, swapped over to the cornerback position, and he is going to be an interesting player that some are saying could potentially be sneaking up into the first round here in the next couple of weeks when it comes to some of these mock drafts, especially after what we're going to see this weekend. And so with saying that, this thing could be a very big NFL draft, not just for Auburn, but for Kevin Steele as the defensive coach for Auburn, to see potentially 3 of his players going in the first round.
Granted, Joe, this is going to be an almost impossible question to answer, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, because you're talking NFL draft, and I'm thinking about Auburn's strengths and weaknesses. When I say weaknesses, I'm talking about in comparison to being a top 10 or 15 team in the nation. So it's a relative weakness in recent years. Before we get to the Gus Malzahn as part of the discussion, which will really blow up. But thinking about NFL Combine this week, NFL Draft upcoming, Auburn has just been loaded along the front in recent years. The secondary, very good players, but not at the LSU Florida standard of elite secondary play. Alabama. Any particular reason why the recruiting's been exceptional? Another top 5 to 10 class this past year, but a bit spotty in certain areas.
A lot of times this comes down to, and unfortunately, and I can just be straight up, is either one of two options, whether it is the option A, which is it's not the right fit. And, Byron Cowart is going to be your key example to this. A couple seasons ago, he was the #1 player in the country. He chooses to go to Auburn. And in fact, if you go back to that National Signing Day, which now thinking about it, might have actually been the last February signing day that was big, not just for Auburn, but for college football, now that we have the early signing period. And you saw him was kind of the very first person to make his commitment to Auburn. And there was a thought that him, C.C. Jefferson, and I want to say one more other Florida kid was going to be all going to the same school. And so Byron Cowart goes to Auburn, and Auburn struggled. And he struggled because, a lot of these players, it's all about the people around you and the coaching staff and how you mix with this. And, people forget that, Auburn went through a period of time where it was one defensive coordinator in 2014, which, which did not work out. And then you go to, as a matter of fact, it was 13-14. It was a couple of these seasons with him. Then you go to the fact that Will Muschamp came in as the defensive coordinator, which was part of that big defensive class that Auburn had. And then he leaves after one season for whatever reason you kind of want to say. And then you bring in what now is Kevin Steele. And I know that you're going to hear this a lot, especially with what's about to happen or what could potentially happen when it comes to the waiver that is going to be going through the NCAA, where a player could leave without penalty for one season if that does eventually come into place. This is about your coaching staff. This is about the fit and the personality when it comes to your players mixing in with your skill position play, or I should say your defensive line coach mixing with your defensive line players, or your linebackers coach and their personalities mixing. That was one thing that really didn't work in Byron Cowart's favor. Is he comes to Auburn and he looks around and he's like, this just isn't fit. This isn't meshing. He goes to Maryland. People make fun of him of, why are you going to Maryland, this school that sucks, but they have 50,000 uniforms. He's getting paid now. So it was a great decision for him to leave. But then you can turn around and you can look at players like your Derek Browns, like your D Fords, like your Marlon Davidsons that you're going to see. See, Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown had this really healthy rivalry. And in fact, when we were down there for Senior Day, or I should say the Senior Bowl coming a few weeks ago when we were down in Mobile for this, they still had this friendly rivalry where they were joking on each other, and it worked really well for them. And that was that type of rivalry that kind of lifted everybody, lifted the defensive line. You saw Big Cat Bryant wanting to get in on the players of the week thing. You see Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown doing this. And honestly now, like, you can go back through over the course of the past 4 or 5 years and look at the defensive players that Auburn's had just from the defensive line. D Ford is the biggest because he's played in the AFC Championship game last year. We saw what happened there. Turns around, goes to San Francisco, is playing in the Super Bowl this year. So for the defensive line, he's the poster child of getting to the NFL. But now you have Derek Brown. Now you have Marlon Davidson. Now you're starting to see Big Cat Bryant. And even Auburn this year in their recruiting class, they go get somebody like a Dre Butler, who is a JUCO guy, and he's going to come in and potentially fill that void on the defensive line. And that works. It's about the personalities that work on this. And sometimes, honestly, it's a character issue. The other option, and option B in this, is the fact that you get a bad egg. And it depends on what university and their recruiting styles. And a lot of people have kind of changed this as we go around. You hear about the Bill Belichick, and there's many books on this now, whether you look at a Michael Lombardi book that he has gone with, that he has done about Bill Belichick and all the things that he's learned in those times, or you can even go to a coach or a former coach, a former general manager, and see what these guys on 4th and Long, which is one that was done about Nick Saban, and the process that comes in with his recruiting, and how whenever he looks for, let's just say, 5 factors. You can look at speed, you can look at ability to run, you can look at physical trait to see if they fit the mold. but one of those is your character. And some schools don't pay attention to that. Some schools do. And honestly, I mean, some guys are just bad eggs, and you don't see that until you get them on campus. Because look, here's the thing: you and I are going to sit here and we're going to be talking. We've talked for about 30 minutes right now. We probably can talk for about another 30 minutes. I can come off and look like this brilliant person that may know all these stats and have all this information and be able to name drop all these players. But the very moment this camera comes off, I can be a total idiot. Like, I may not know anything, but you don't know it because you just got this 1 hour snapshot, which is what you do in a recruiting visit, whether it's at the school or whether it's at their their home, whether it's with mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, whether it's an official visit. You only get that. You don't know the rest of the stuff until guy's sitting there. It's his first night at Auburn. It's an August, July night, whatever, if he's a late enrollee, and he's by himself. He doesn't have anything to do. Somebody invites him to a party and he wants to go and he has fun and he finds his new friends, and his new friends don't have his best interests in mind. And you want to see how he's going to react that way or this way. That happens with a lot of them. There's some schools that are getting better when it comes to weeding the character issues out. And honestly, unfortunately for Auburn, and look, I'm not going to lie, Auburn in the news the past week hasn't really been that great for the Auburn Tigers. Okay. You've got a former Auburn Tiger that body slammed a cop like in North Carolina. You've got two other former Auburn Tigers that was caught with like 157 pounds of weed trying to enter Mexico. Like, it hasn't been that great of a week. That's that one thing. That's that character issue that Auburn needs to learn and to be better at. And it's part of that growing process when it comes to adjusting your recruiting and how you recruit individual players.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned D Ford in the AFC Championship game. So let me ask you this, Joe. Don't they teach these guys at Auburn, these defensive linemen, how to line up onside?
No, they do. It's so funny because, with you, and you talk to a lot of radio personalities and you go around, and I was listening the other day to one, and I cannot remember what station it is. Honestly, I'll be straight with you. I know the radio station. I'm just not going to call the guy out. And he even said this, and it amazed me. He goes, do you realize that the players do not know where the line of scrimmage is, that they have to ask the ref? They don't have that little blue line in front of them. And I just thought to myself, I thought that was common knowledge. Like, I really thought that was common knowledge that he knew. And honestly, with that mistake, that was a total mental error. It was a total mental error. And unfortunately, here's my thing. I'm an Auburn fan. We know I'm an Auburn fan. You can hear how I talk about this team, and you know I'm an Auburn fan. The other side of this, I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Oh, so for me, seeing what happened last year hurt, because I remember D Ford when he was in Gadsden having his party home for the NFL draft. I remember D Ford when he was in Gadsden playing football, and he was this high school kid that Auburn fans just hoped he was good. I remember D Ford and all the times that he did play at Auburn and help that team get to a national championship, to the national championship game. And like, I can remember all of those. And so for me, I was very excited when D Ford went there. I'm excited because I'm a North Alabama kid about Reggie Ragland playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, because when I was doing play-by-play for his high school football game. So there's all of these sides of this that I love, but with D Ford, it hurts me. But also at the same time, going through what Kansas City went through over the course of the last month or two, seeing how that team came back, in the fact that it was his replacement is the one that was part of the reason why they won the Super Bowl. And, it really hurt. But at the same time, D Ford learned from that. And it's not like he has struggled. He made it to the Super Bowl again with the San Francisco 49ers. He's going to grow in the offseason and potentially get back to being the starting defensive end. But at the same time, him being offsides, and people want to act like, oh, well, that wasn't the play that determined the game. There was overtime. There was all this other stuff. People forget he was offside when Kansas City intercepted the football that would have ended the game.
Oh, I don't forget
that would have been the end. That would have been the part where Mahomes comes out, takes the knee, and the Chiefs are going to Atlanta. That's the part that really sucks, is I have friends in Kansas City, and we were talking about all this, and I was like, guys, the Super Bowl is 2.5 hours away. Like, we're going to go, and it's going to be this huge party in Atlanta. And then that happened, and I'm just the Chiefs fan in me is like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Like, you don't know how hard it is to get back to the AFC Championship game or even get to the Super Bowl. But then the Auburn fan in me is like, oh, why did it have to be Dee Ford? Like, do you not realize how much we already go through because of the fact that one of our former kickers was the kicker for the Chicago Bears that hit the crossbar 3 times in the playoff game? Like, we already have to deal with this, and now we have the Dee Ford issue, and I'm like, oh, this is just not fun.
It was the day of championship games in NFL history in which produced the 2 teams that probably should not have been in the Super Bowl. So the issue I have, Joe, is that in the other game, the Rams-Saints game, that was the call to be made. Wasn't made. Saints should have been in the Super Bowl. Game would have been over. Most likely they needed to kick, but game would have been over. So we know that penalty should have been called, game decided. What kills me about and now I don't even have a leg to stand on in regards to how it affected me after hearing your plight as a Chiefs fan. I was simply a guy that wanted to see the Patriots lose because I'm sick of seeing them playing Super Bowls. But I hate it when the penalty should be called. It was a penalty. The official did the right thing, but it didn't affect the play. He's on the other side of the field. Brady went to the opposite side. Him being a step off didn't affect Brady. He didn't get a pass rush. It didn't matter. I hate to see that. And I'm one that Tom Brady's the most accomplished quarterback in the history of the NFL. It could be argued greatest, maybe not, but the most accomplished, no question. I just always like to take the devil's advocate side of look at this, look at that, and there would have been another one. He threw the game-losing interception in the AFC Championship game, but of course it's Tom Brady, and it got called back.
And you know what's funny about this is if you are a Patriots hater, you can go back and look at the way that they lost to the Tennessee Titans, and it was not the exact same scenario, but it was on a Tom Brady interception that he threw as the Patriots were trying to go down the field and tie the football game up again. And that's the reason why the Patriots were the ones that didn't go and play the Kansas City Chiefs. Because trust me, man, as much and as great as it was, and even going through this playoff run where the 24 points down, the 10 points down to the Titans, like after being down 24 points, I wasn't even worried. Like, I was like, okay, they're down 10 points to the Titans. No big deal. But the thing is that sucked. That entire week leading into that, I would already thought the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl. I was already talking to my friends in Kansas City, like, all right, what are we doing in Miami? How are we going to do this? Where are we going to go? Because I wanted the Patriots. Like, it was that Boston Red Sox 2004 storybook ending of you can go and win the World Series, but it is nothing if you do not go through Yankee Stadium to win the ALCS, to go to the World Series. And I was like, if they're going to go, they are going to have to go through New England. I want this to happen. I want this to be the biggest game in Arrowhead history. Let's make this huge thing. And so when the Patriots lost, I was like, all right, well, they're already going to Miami. And so I was not checked out, but I was more reserved. And I was about getting upset when it came to them being down to Tennessee, because I was like, all right, they're already there. They're already in Miami, in my opinion.
I've kept this comment on the screen from our guy, Jay Jobs. Auburn should have beaten Florida State to win the national championship game, the final BCS national championship in 2013. And the reason I go to that is obviously the GUS Malzahn conversation. And I've been watching football for longer than I would like to admit, 40 years plus. And that, to me, was the greatest turnaround. Somebody would have to leave in the comments, and I've asked people to do this, and nobody's come up with anything close. The greatest turnaround in the history of college football, or at least over the past 4 decades. Auburn going from 0-8 in the SEC, a 3-win team, to within seconds of winning a national championship the next year. I don't think anything rivals that.
No, it doesn't rival it. And yes, they should have beat Florida State in the national championship. I honestly believed, and people have called me an idiot for thinking this, but I really, really wish that Trey Mason, when he broke that big, long touchdown, if he would have just nailed down on the one, if he would have done exactly what you had seen the Giants try to do against the Patriots in a couple of Super Bowls ago, because with the way that that offense was working against Florida State and their Florida State's defense, you were not going to stop Auburn on that 1 yard line if that was what Trey Mason had done. And so for me, leaving a minute and 13 on the clock was way too much. But you also have to think about, going back and looking at the way that the kicking game was. Auburn's kicker in that football game, people don't realize he was actually having like a leg issue, and he'd also been kind of sick. So even the kickoff return that Florida State ran back for a touchdown in the second half, normally and all season long for Auburn, that kick goes into the end zone and it's a touchback. So if you go back and rewatch that game, Auburn's kicker was the whole time was kicking balls that Florida State was actually returning for some sort of a gain, where during the regular season that wasn't happening. So there was a lot of issues on that game that, like, honestly, I'll be straight with you. I've not watched that football game since I watched it the first time. I was live after that game on our sister station Jocks in Birmingham, and I was very happy that I was not the main voice that evening, because it was about 11 o'clock or so whenever we actually went live after the Auburn post game and everything. And I was furious. I was beyond furious and the whole time after that football game. And I think we took phone calls that night all the way until about 2 a.m. Talking to Auburn fans that were upset after that. And they should have won the national championship that game. That was another one, just like going back to that Kansas City Chiefs game against the Titans earlier this year. I was like, all right, they've won the national championship. They are the national champs. With the way that they came out and the way that they were playing in that first half, I thought there was no way Florida State was going to come back. But there were small mistakes that Auburn made along the way that did allow Florida State to do it. And then there was also the health of the kicker.
So that leads me into the GUS Malzahn portion of this conversation, because he's had such a odd tenure at Auburn, because it started with the biggest turnaround that we've seen maybe in the history of college football, to, okay, a team that is a preseason top 5 to 10 team over the next few years because of what people saw there. And then they couldn't live up to the expectations, bottoming out with I believe 7-6 finish and a Birmingham Bowl victory over
Memphis.
What's that? Memphis. Yes.
Memphis. Big win against Memphis.
To that remarkable 3-week stretch against Georgia and Alabama, beating the top 2 teams in the country, and all they had to do, and when I say all, I know they were playing one of the best teams in the country, is beat Georgia for a second time to get into the playoff. And now they seem to be in this place with those 2 monsters in the division that it's going to be difficult to get past that kind of 9-3 top 15 type of deal. Where's the fan base stand on GUS Malzahn? And he took a big risk, and we talked about it a number of times, in taking over the play calling duties, even though that's what he does best, but he did it with a true freshman quarterback. So we'll get a better read on that, I think, this year.
Okay, so all right.
There's a lot to unpack there. You go to it, Joe.
Okay, so let's start back at the bowl game. All right. It is another scenario, because in the state, the idea is Alabama thrives on winning national championships. Matter of fact, I mean, we talked about the helmet. You have the old helmet because it doesn't have the right national championship number. Alabama is about winning the national championships. Auburn is about beating Alabama. That is the theory. That is the way that it has been for many, many years. And honestly, this honestly is basically still the same, but there's kind of a new added extra dot on there when it comes to your bullet points. It's beat Alabama, but then you have that extra little space, whether it's an A or a 1 or whatever, a little star, whatever you want to put on it. If you beat Alabama, most likely, and I emphasize most likely, you were playing in the SEC championship to play in the college football playoff, or you're playing in the SEC championship to play for the national championship. One of those 2 things that have happened over the course of 2010, 2013, 2017, those types of seasons when Auburn has won. This year was the exception. Auburn beating Alabama did nothing for Auburn except help them feel better about going into the offseason. The problem is that Auburn had glaring issues. They've had glaring issues all season long. And yes, I will say that Malzahn at SEC Media Days last year in Birmingham had never been happier to sit and talk about being the play caller again and having those as his duties. Look, there's always been drama with Malzahn, whether it was Rhett Lashley, whether it was Chip Lindsey, and even So luckily last year he took that all off by saying, "I am the play caller. This is what I am doing. This is when you look now and you zoom in at me on the offensive side, you also don't have to worry about is X, Y, or Z being the one that's coaching. Is Chip Lindsey going to be up in the press box and having to send the plays down, and I have to approve we're getting on the field? There's none of that anymore. And you saw that. Go back, and I will never forget this play. It was Auburn was backed up on like its own 1 yard line. You see Jarrett Stidham, because this goes back to Jarrett Stidham before everybody in New England loved him. Jarrett Stidham is standing in at the snap. He was ready to go. He was ready to call. Malzahn or somebody on the sidelines starts waving him off. And you see Stidham looking up and trying to determine what is the play that they are calling so he could get it, so he can make his adjustments, snap the football all before the play clock goes because you only have 40 seconds. The problem was, rumored, alleged, behind-the-scenes stuff, Chip Lindsey kept calling plays down, and Malzahn kept saying no to those plays. And so Chip Lindsey and Malzahn could never actually agree on the play, which caused Jarrett Stidham to have to blow a timeout so that he could go over and they could figure the play out. Now, that's 2 years ago, urban legend, rumor, whatever you want to say. Last year, there was none of that. There was none of this. So if Jarrett Stidham is on the 50-yard line or Clemson's 40-yard line, Malzahn is at the line of scrimmage, and Chip Lindsey is 20 yards or 30 yards downfield. And if you guys are going to run a fourth down play, how is Chip Lindsey 30 yards downfield going to call the play? Is it going to be Malzahn? You and I have talked about this. So going into last year, it was good that he did. The only problem is, look at what we just talked about with 2013. Everybody that is an Auburn fan is like, we need an offense like 2013. No, because college football isn't the same as it was in 2013. In 2013, it was a novelty to even run the read option as many times as Malzahn was doing it. And so in turn, he changed, and you saw more teams start to develop the RPOs, which is what we kind of see now. That's what we've talked about earlier in this, is the birth of the RPO, and especially in Auburn's offense. And you can really see it whenever Auburn's calling plays, because even playing Madden, like I play Madden 20 religiously, even playing that, I can watch and say, hey, it's going to be a repass option. There's the open route. He's going to be running a slant here. And I can just do that literally just by playing Madden, and it's what happens. The problem was the plays that Auburn were running in August, in September, in October were the same plays that Auburn was running all through November, except in the Iron Bowl. Because with the way that Malzahn is and the way that he coached, he would set up a play in August, in September, in the spring game. He would use that play to set up something to try to fake Nick Saban out in the Iron Bowl. I'm not joking. This is how his mind worked. So when we would get upset and say, wait a second, why are you calling that play again? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Like literally, like if you're watching right now and you see my hands like this, like I'm this close to the television, like screaming at it, it's all to set up something in the Iron Bowl. Great. You can win the Iron Bowl. Problem is you sacrifice Florida. You sacrificed LSU. You sacrificed Georgia. You sacrificed Minnesota. Like all of these games you sacrificed because you were setting something up. Now you bring in Chad Morris. And before he even said it, which he finally said it down at the Senior Bowl, that Chad Morris was going to call plays, I was thinking there is no way on earth Malzahn can have the man that people forget helped Clemson in Clemsoning and become a national power on the offensive side. The guy that taught Taj Boyd to be good, the guy that recruited Deshaun Watson, the guy that does all of this for Clemson, there's no way he can be your offensive coordinator and not be the one calling plays. Now he is. So now we're back to this scenario where Malzahn has to step back because everybody knows his plays. Everybody knows everything he's running. You have beat writers in Auburn that are saying, here's him running this play. Here's him doing the exact same thing back in 2015. Here's him doing the exact same thing back in 2014. It doesn't work. College football is evolving. Nick Saban isn't running a power I formation with a fullback anymore. He's got RPOs out his tail. He's running all of these plays like this. He now has dual threat quarterbacks. This isn't the same. You've got to adjust. You've got to grow. And Malzahn has not really been that good at growing. And so bringing in somebody like Chad Morris, which he has nothing to lose, Chip Lindsey. I mean, look, the thing about this, I think that also angers Auburn fans is these offensive coordinators that have left Auburn have went on now. Chip Lindsey is now the head coach at Troy. Rhett Lashley just got the offensive coordinator job at Miami. He didn't get that because Malzahn made a call. He went to UConn. He left UConn and went to SMU. By the way, he was the reason that he went to SMU is because Chad Morris went to Arkansas. And because of what he did at SMU last season with that team that only lost a couple of football games, he's now the offensive coordinator down on Miami. He did that on his own. Now, he's probably taken some stuff that he's learned from Malzahn, but Auburn fans are looking at this and going, great. So if Chad Morris leaves, are we now going to try to go back and get Rhett Lashley to bring him back in to do what we thought he was doing 2 years ago? That's the problem.
Would love to have Joe back on to do another hour-long live stream, maybe in prime time. We talked about that because we, outside of the quarterback position, didn't even talk about personnel with Auburn headed towards spring practice here in a couple of weeks, the schedule for 2020, and all sorts of other good stuff. The one last follow-up I would like to do with you was a comment that you made, and really a discussion point that I thought was pretty fascinating when we talked prior to the bowl game against Minnesota, was a faction of Auburn fans saying, look at that guy in Minnesota and look what he's doing with top 40 and 50 talent. We've got top 10 talent, and look at us. And this guy almost won the Big Ten this year. He went 11-2, and then he actually beat you in the ball game, which none of us expected as a touchdown underdog. Did anything come of that? Did that continue to steamroll?
Let's just say one, and it was one of the questions that got posted, thrown up over here. Do Auburn fans trust Malzahn? No, they do not. And it's now one of those scenarios for Auburn fans where you have a fantastic defensive coordinator in Kevin Steele. And honestly, Auburn wasted their defense last year. They really did. Was it the best option? Absolutely. But he's going to go play for Kentucky. He may even start for Kentucky if he can get some sort of a waiver or whatever. With the NCAA and the way things are happening now, he may be able to. But starting Bo Nix and playing Bo Nix was the right decision. And this offense is growing now in the right direction, in which it shouldn't be feeling like Auburn needs to go out and get a JUCO transfer every single time now. You're bringing in a running back like Tank, who is a beast. Like, those guys are going to help you. The problem with it is what you said is still the case. And honestly, the thought from a lot of Auburn fans were not okay, we've got Malzahn, this is going to be our guy. There's never going to be this love for Malzahn like you see at other universities. The best thing that Auburn fans have said that has happened to Auburn is that you saw that coach in Minnesota remain the coach in Minnesota, because that now means that in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, there's a potential that if this thing goes sideways again this year, that Auburn can go to Minnesota and try to bring him in, because PJ Fleck, in all reality, he's Bruce Pearl, but with the football side. Like, that's what it is. And honestly, the best thing that has happened to Malzahn over the course of the last 2 or 3 years is the basketball team going to the Final Four. It's the baseball team going to the College World Series, because today on our show, where 2 and 3 years ago, we would be figuring out some sort of scenario where we could talk about Auburn football Now the conversation is, hold up, does Auburn wait and keep Isaac Okoro out for another game and hold off for Kentucky this weekend? Wait, why did the Auburn baseball team lose all 3 games to UCF when they're a top 15 baseball team this year? Because of the success at Auburn in all of the male sports, it's now actually taken some of the light off of Malzahn until SEC Media Days, until Auburn basketball loses whenever they lose, whether it's in the NCAA tournament, the Final Four, if they win the national championship, whatever it is. When the baseball team stops playing and the focus is now back on it. Because even in spring, we talked about it beforehand, middle of March is when Auburn football gets going spring practice. We're probably barely even going to discuss it because now it's about basketball. Now it's about the Atlanta Braves and what they're doing. Now it's about Auburn baseball. All of these other sports have given Malzahn this little leeway so that he can make adjustments and we're not shining that spotlight on it like it's Lord of the Rings.
Jay Jobs, it's a good question. I've thought of it as well, and we'll hit Joe up on another episode as we need to go move on to a little USC and Kentucky talk in the next few minutes. Those will not be live, but recorded versions for those particular teams as we break down positions across college football and give you position previews. But man, if you're really listening to the discussion here with Joe, he delivers each and every time. We should have a ton of people on here. I know that it's not a good time during the workday, but this is why Joe said early in the conversation here, get out there and share the videos, and that would help us tremendously because you have, folks, social media influence spheres that I don't have, that Joe doesn't have. You reach different people. And please help us by sharing the videos and the wealth of insight and information here over the last hour. Again, Joe, we appreciate it so much.
I love you, man. Anytime you need me, you know I'm there.
I will be knocking your door down, and we will put something together here in the next few weeks, hopefully, with another Auburn football discussion. And we may talk about that other team in the state, too.
They don't have anything going on, do they?
Man, Joe, I appreciate it. Let people know where you are.
All right, here in Montgomery, you can follow me on Twitter at Joe Hunk. Our show, you've seen it over here, the Fallout 740. That's where you can follow us on Twitter as well. I talked about this green screen directly behind me. We have a video game stream. In fact, we just did a college football tournament a couple of weeks ago. Now, starting tomorrow night, we're actually doing a college basketball tournament where we're taking the video game NBA 2K20 and we're converting it for college basketball, so that we're going to be doing that. So we're all over social media. We have the video game stream and all of that. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Hunk. And trust me, you're going to get football, you're going to get basketball, a ton of baseball. And yes, I'm a wrestling nerd. So I'm just going to go ahead and prepare you for that now.
All right. And again, like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Joe, it's been a great time. Appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day and rest of your week.
You too, man. Love you.